GoodETxSG Update June 20, 2015 ICC Mars Colony Conference Report. I woke up at a little after 3 a.m. on Saturday, June the 20th and was a bit anxious about this conference. I had spent the previous day at the swimming pool with my wife and 2 children and was pretty wiped out from one of the very few sunny days we have had in Texas this season. I was quite sunburned to the point where even my scalp was in pain. I was informed of the previous afternoon that the final negotiations for the joint SSP Alliance, Sphere Alliance and ICC Leadership Conference had been completed and to expect the normal pick-up method during a time window between 3:30 and 4 a.m. the following morning. I knew this was going to be an interesting and possibly long conference, and being so tired from that day's activities I decided to go to bed good and early. I turned in a little after 7 p.m. when it was still daylight outside and was soon asleep. I woke up at 11:30 and thought it was much later. This meeting was very much on my mind, and the fact that it was going to be at a Mars colony under the control of the ICC had my mind running non-stop. I was finally able to get back to sleep around 12:20. I woke up again a little after 3 a.m. and decided to go to the kitchen to get a drink before I changed and got ready for my little blue, indigo orb friend to zip through the wall of my bedroom. I had just barely made it into the living room when the little orb decided to mix things up and zipped into the room through the closed patio door. I decided that I didn't have time to go back to my room and change and come back, so I put on the flip-flops, type of sandal footwear, that I had worn to the pool the day before and gave the orb the signal that I was ready to be transported. Before I knew it, I was standing in the familiar room that I am usually transported to in the VIP conference area of the LUC. I was wearing shorts, a t-shirt and the loose-fitting flip-flops, and not at all looking prepared for a diplomatic excursion to a Mars facility. One of the LUC personnel came into the room and asked me if there was anything I needed. I asked for something to wear and some boots. He asked my size and left the room. Within about 10 minutes he returned with a light blue jumpsuit with the SSP Alliance mission patch on the left shoulder with the places for a unit and name patch left blank, Velcro patch areas with no patches. I put on the jumpsuit and boots that had laces and a zipper on the side, different than I normally received, that actually looked as if they had not been worn before. The same was the case with the jumpsuit. When I was ready, I was escorted down the narrow halls of the common area of the LUC to one of the larger hangar areas where there was a good-sized group of people standing in a semicircle beside one of the 50 modular transport vessels that I had traveled in prior and had been picked up from my home in to be scanned for nanites and eye infections after an unpleasant encounter with opposition elements in a previous encounter. I saw Gonzalez, the SSP Alliance delegate, and he acknowledged my presence and started the introductions. There was an ICC representative that looked extremely familiar to me. I still cannot place where I have seen him before. He appeared to be in his late 40s, about 5 feet 11 inches, 200 pounds, with blue, gray eyes and mostly white hair cut short. He was wearing a very nice suit that I had seen the Committee of 200 Inches members wearing at the Super Federation conferences. It was of a different cut and looked futuristic a bit, and kind of like the style you see businessmen and politicians wear in India. Lieutenant Col. Gonzalez then introduced the 4 SSP Alliance security team members to me, who were also intuitive empaths. 2 of them would accompany me at all times and 2 would be assigned to Gonzalez. There were also 4 crew members of the craft that we would be traveling to Mars and who were introduced as a group. The rest of the people present were members of the SSP Alliance Council, who then wished everyone luck and a productive meeting as we boarded the vessel. Being modular, these vessels are always in different configurations on the inside depending on the mission they are on. I have seen them set up as troop transports, mobile medical treatment centers, and VIP for meetings and transports. This time there were seats for all present. We were informed that this trip would take close to half an hour because Mars was just on the other side of the Sun, so it added time to the trip for a reason that was not explained. These vessels usually make trips of these distances in just a few minutes or less. I do not know if this was a way to spend extra time with the ICC representative or was in fact truly a technical issue having to do with the position of Mars being behind the Sun compared to the position of the Earth and Moon. As we lifted off and flew through the bay doors that opened, we could see the surface of the Moon grow distant quickly and then the Earth through the transparent panels in the walls of the vessel. We then went to speed and the panels changed to an opaque color. Gonzalez and the ICC representative began to talk about the conference and all who would be there. Gonzalez again told the ICC representative that we appreciated them agreeing to the terms of allowing us to bring the armed security, choosing the site of the conference once in orbit, the tours, and allowing us to bring one family of our choosing back with us to question and to either provide sanctuary to or allow to return to their home colony depending on the family's wishes. I sat and listened since I had not been a part of the negotiations and hoped to overhear something new from the process. Once we arrived in outer orbit of Mars, the panels in the walls went transparent again and a larger version of the smart glass pads lowered from the ceiling. It was about 70 inches across diagonally and had a real-time display of Mars with icons where there were ICC colonies and industrial complexes in the northern hemisphere. The ICC representative stood up and began pointing at each and giving his recommendations of the best facility to tour and hold the conference would be. Gonzalez interrupted and stated that he had already come up with a location based on the SSP Alliance Council's request and the information was based on intelligence from an ICC defector. The ICC representative immediately looked concerned and that look intensified when the plus sign icon popped up on the coordinates that were already in the system. It marked a place that was in the southern polar region. The ICC representative stated that this was an old industrial plant and that there wasn't a colony there. Gonzalez stated that our intelligence was fresh and that indeed there was a moderate-sized colony there and that a recent ICC defector had lived there and provided a detailed report. The ICC representative stated that he would have to contact his superiors to get clearance. Gonzalez reminded him that we were promised access to any facility and colony that we requested for this conference and tour. The ICC representative excused himself and went into a small room to use a communication device. He emerged a short time later and stated that it would take about an hour before we were granted clearance to land but that the locations was approved. It was obvious that this was a stalling tactic for the unexpected choice in locations to give the facility time for some very quick preparations for our unanticipated arrival. After about 50 very long minutes we heard an announcement that the crew had received communication for clearance to land. As we moved in closer we could see some thin wispy ice clouds in the upper atmosphere and some rolling dust storms much further to the north of our trajectory. We then saw the beautiful blue and bright pinkish discharges on the shielding all around the vessel as it entered the atmosphere at speed. There was no sound or turbulence in the entry of the atmosphere. We then headed directly towards one area of the ground that was hilly and rocky with snow and ice in low-lying areas. We made a quick turn with no inertial or G-force effects on the passengers. Our vessel hugged the terrain at high speed for a few kilometers until we came to a small canyon-looking area. It was not like the canyons toward the equator and in the northern hemisphere but was described as a canyon nonetheless. It looked more like an ancient washed-out riverbed between larger rock outcroppings. We began to slow down as we were headed toward a flat rocky outcropping and as we did a turret-looking cylinder structure rose out the top of the rocks and there was windows around the structure. It appeared to be an observation deck or air traffic control tower. A large bay door then opened below and we slowed down quite a bit more as we entered. We were then inside a square tunnel hewn out of the rock with bays on either side of us as we continued through. As I looked through the rectangular doors I could see two teardrop-shaped craft in each bay. These craft appeared unusual to me in that I had not seen SSP craft that had a shiny chromed metal finish. They always seem to have a black or gray coloring much like the stealth bombers that most people are now familiar with. The third bay on the right was the one we were directed to and there was one of the tear-shaped vessels inside and an empty bay that barely accommodated our vessel. We landed on the platform and powered down our vessel. I sat back in my chair and the reality hit me that we had arrived at an opposition stronghold on Mars. I made note of a catwalk that went out between the two vessels and the double bay. The catwalk went to a wide walkway and staging area where there were crates and instruments on carts. About a dozen of the facility's security team immediately came out onto the staging area wearing the uniforms that I had seen before. They were a DV camo, pixelated pattern, that were made up of the colors black, rusty red and dark tan. They were carrying rifles that looked much like our security teams. The ICC representative stated that he should go and smooth the road for us, and Gonzalez agreed, ordering the doors to be opened so he could exit. We observed the ICC representative speak to the security personnel, and then went through the checkpoint, returning a short time later holding both hands in the air with the thumbs up signal. He sort of half jogged to the vessel where he met us at the open doors and stated that everything was on schedule. The ICC leaders participating in the conference had been informed of the location and were on the way. He stated that we needed to go through the security checkpoint and meet the facility commander who wanted to talk to us. The ICC representative then told us what the subject of that conversation was going to be. He was carefully watching our reactions as he gave us a summary of what to expect from the base commander. He stated that the people at this facility were here for generations and that they were under the impression for decades now that the Earth had been through some sort of cataclysm and was no longer inhabitable. He said that we are being asked to not throw off the social dynamics of the facility by revealing that this was not the case or that any of us were from the surface of Earth. He then turned around and did the same half jog back towards the facility security team while we looked at each other wide-eyed regarding what he had just said. Gonzalez said, "You heard the man, let's not have any incident here if we can avoid it." We then filed out of the SSP Alliance vessel and headed towards the security checkpoint. We were stopped immediately when a very cold-looking security personnel looked at our security contingent and said absolutely no weapons past this point. We stopped and Gonzalez looked at the ICC representative and stated, "You know that is a deal breaker. I'd hate for things to end before they got started here, wouldn't you?" The ICC representative walked past the checkpoint and down the hallways and spoke to the base commander. The base commander was visibly agitated from the beginning and this did not make him any happier. The base commander called to his security and waved us through. This was another obstacle overcome by Gonzalez. So far so good. As we entered, the base commander gave us the storyline about the people not knowing that the Earth was still thriving and that this wasn't anything to do with any slavery theories being promoted by the SSP Alliance but was a complex social experiment. It was stressed that we needed to be careful not to contaminate a multi-decades-long experiment that will help humanity. I looked at Gonzalez and he rolled his eyes at me as this was being said. The base commander then stated that the main hall was being set up for the conference and that we would be taken on a tour of the industrial plant first that was 8 kilometers away via an underground train. He said after the conference we would then tour the colony and meet the people, see their living conditions and ask a family if they would be willing to leave with us. We were walked through an area of the colony that had obviously been cleared of people for us to walk through. The area was a ghost town and that much usable space is not wasted in these facilities. We made our way to another area that was also cut out of the rocks and unfinished. There was a single monorail track going in one side and out the other of a tube that was glass-like but not smooth or polished. It was ribbed or bubbled, it seemed. It was possibly vitrified rock. A very thin train then arrived and we were told to load up. The way we entered caused us to be seated in a strange order. The seats were 2 by 2 and facing each other. I ended up being several people down from Gonzalez and had one of our security personnel on either side of me. There was a solid row of the facility's security personnel across from me. I noticed one of them kept whispering to the other and finally asked me as we were traveling down the tunnel, "Where are you from?" I responded without thinking, "Texas," and received a very shocked look on the 3 faces that I could see in front of me. I knew immediately that I had already screwed up. The facility security began to immediately talk among themselves and I could feel the eyes of our security team, on me, and within a few seconds could see an outstretched neck and a head turned my way from the general area that Gonzalez was sitting. Yay, I screwed up big time. I didn't want to look at anyone else from my team and just kind of looked out the window behind the facility security team and watched the blurry wall until we arrived at the industrial plant. As we disembarked from the train, the murmurs were growing louder among the facility security personnel. I then came face to face with Gonzalez, who had a smart-ass look on his face and a smirk. I looked at him and said, "Yay, I screwed up." I then told him what happened, and he said that he had heard them discussing the way he and I smelled and the fact that I was sunburned and that I didn't look like someone that has been on a colony or stationed on a vessel. He went on to say that people in these closed environments can tell each other apart. When someone like us comes in smelling like hair gel, deodorant and coconut-scented tanning oils and aloe vera sunburn cream, we reek of earth and smell very alien and out of place to them. These people all use the exact same toiletry products, and even the smells of the foods that come out of the pores in our skin are a dead giveaway. He said it certainly doesn't help when one of us says we are from Texas. He said he was brainstorming on coming up with an off-the-books facility or other vessels or locations that he could say were code-named Texas, but he thought the damage was done. This proved to be correct halfway through our tour of the industrial complex. It was obvious that the talk was spreading through this facility security team very quickly, and the ICC representative was very aware of it. He was making sure we saw him glancing back and forth between the people chattering and our group with a disapproving look on his face. We were all walking in a close group as one of the residents was explaining what each of the robotic machines did, and along the conveyor systems what each of the people did at the workstations in the process of producing the various shaped panels that were optical and neurological relays and displays. We were seeing a version that was a slightly curved panel of one size, but they stated down the tunnel system there were other rooms where the same panels were produced in various configurations and for various other types of biological neurological interfaces, non-human customers. It was at about this time that another monorail train arrived with many more security personnel. They told us to halt, and they separated the security team that was with us, disarmed them and escorted them to the trains and left. A new security team was assigned to us, and the ICC representative that obviously had an earwig, communication device in his ear, told us that we were not to communicate with the security team unless it was to do with something security related. They then brought over a metal cylinder that had a spray atomizer on it and told us to spray it on our bodies and rub it into our faces and hair. It was an odor neutralizer, and it didn't have a scent of its own. I was worried that it had something in it, but Gonzalez said it's okay, and I unzipped my jumpsuit and pulled it down to rub the solution into my arms, shoulders, neck, hair and face. We then ended the tour early because the ICC representative stated that the other ICC leadership had arrived and were setting up for their presentation in the main hall. We waited for the monorail train to arrive back, piled back on it and headed back to the colony. On the way back, one of our security personnel leaned over to Gonzalez and I heard him say something's not right. Gonzalez nodded to him and said, "Keep me informed. E's get false hits often, and it's good to have at least 3 present to triangulate any threats." When we would point out a possible feeling, we were always told to stay on the scent and report any new hits. When we arrived at the colony, there was a completely different energy. There were people everywhere that all appeared between the ages of 8 years of age and about 60, at the oldest, bustling around in one-piece suits that were obviously their Sunday best. They were also all trying to look like they were going about their business while trying to sneak a peek at the new arrivals and seemed to be trying to make eye contact. It seemed that they had been told that we would be touring the facility and asking one family to leave with us to give a report about the facility and how it is ran and what it's like to live there. We were brought into the main hall that looked like an area that people are brought in for daily propaganda, and there were a large number of ICC leadership members present who were bustling about as well, and it was difficult to count how many were there. They sat us down and put on a dog and pony show on a large smart glass screen that showed all sorts of technologies that they produce, what they procure and trade for those technologies, and stated that they had ongoing trade agreements with almost 900 civilizations and did occasional trade with far more than that. They showed all sorts of spacecraft and spacecraft components that some groups integrate into their own technologies, and also discussed the exopolitical agreements they had made with groups that passed through our sector on a regular basis using the nearby natural portal systems that are a part of the cosmic web. After this presentation we were taken on a tour of the colony. People were very eager to please and show us their dwellings that were the size of my dining room and housed a family of 4. They had very little in the form of physical possessions, and there seemed to be a caste system that ironically was similar to the movie Divergent but on more of a micro level. We had gotten to the end of the tour where we had seen their environmental control system and their laundry and recycling system, everything is recycled, and community centers. It was now time for Gonzalez to give the ICC representative the choice of the family we were to take back with us. He gave the number of a certain family's dwelling that was an alphanumeric number outside their door, and 15 minutes later a man, woman, teenage son and preteen daughter showed up with a small bag in each of their hands. They seemed kind of stoic and nervous. This was to be expected, but they seemed off to me. I didn't say anything at the time. One of the E/security personnel leaned over to Gonzalez and whispered to him, and Gonzalez ordered us all to our vessel. When the door was closed, Gonzalez turned to the people and told them they were safe and that he would not betray their good faith. He said that we know that there is another member of your family that is not present. The father said, "How could you know that?" Gonzalez motioned to our security personnel and said that our people have abilities. The family then clammed up and would not talk. Gonzalez became upset and said he would straighten this out, and he and the 2 security personnel assigned to him left the vessel. We sat in uncomfortable silence for about 10 minutes, and then all 4 of the crew came out and said, "We have over a dozen of the facility's security personnel coming out fast with weapons high towards the craft." They asked me what should we do. I asked if they saw Gonzalez and they said no, he was not out there. I told them to open the doors and to stand down. The crew enacted security measures that wiped the systems of information that would be helpful to the enemy. When the doors to our vessel opened, the facility security personnel then entered and disarmed our security personnel and took us into custody. I had that sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, knowing that something had gone wrong and wondering if Gonzalez and the others were okay. The facility security team walked us in, straight past the base commander that was in a very heated conversation with the ICC representative. Something had gone very wrong, and his ego was bruised or his authority was challenged in front of his men. He was extremely upset and was no longer listening to the ICC representative who outranked him. We were walked to a wall that suddenly had a double door where there was none before. They opened it and we were then walked into a detention facility that was conspicuously absent on the previous tour. As we walked back through the rows of cells, we saw quite a lot of people in various psychological stages of psychological distress locked up. When we reached the back cell where Gonzalez and the 2 other security personnel were detained, I was relieved to see them alive. We were all locked up and left without a word spoken to us in the same cell. Gonzalez said that the base commander was a tyrant and a total megalomaniac who was not used to people challenging him diplomatically or otherwise on his base. He said that the recent attack that the rogue SSP Alliance forces had done on Mars had come up in the argument and was obviously a point of contention that the base commander used to toss him in the brig. I asked what was going to happen, and he said that from the way a base commander was talking it didn't sound good, which then left all of us thinking the worst. It wasn't a minute later that we saw our blue, indigo orb friends zipping through the walls of the cell, 1 for each of us. They danced around for a couple seconds and the other SSP personnel who had never traveled this way backed against the wall. Gonzalez explained how the transportation works, and then we each followed the SOP and were soon back at the lock room where I was transported at the beginning of this journey. Upon our unexpected arrival, there was an intrusion alarm going off at the lock and armed security came into the room very quickly. Gonzalez told the SSP Alliance personnel to report to their units for debriefs. They left the room with the armed security teams and the door was closed, leaving Gonzalez and myself alone in the room. Gonzalez then said we lost a vessel but didn't leave any team members behind. That's something. He stated that we received quite a lot of good intelligence, which was the real goal of this mission. He stated that the ICC's goal was propaganda, and that since the recent reports that were released to the public about the slave trade and labor going on by the ICC, that they have been extremely upset and worked up about information being public that was never supposed to be so. He told me to continue doing what I am doing and that he didn't know where I was going from here. He said he didn't know if I was going to visit Rotterdam or be taken back home. We said our goodbyes and he left to begin his debrief process. I was extremely exhausted from the 14-hour ordeal and the stress from the adrenaline highs and lows, and was ready to just go back to bed. I removed the borrowed jumpsuit and boots and placed them on the table that used to be in the middle of the room where my flip-flops were sitting. Since that room had become so popular as a drop-off and pick-up area, the large wooden conference table had long since been slid against a wall to the side of the room to make more room for foot traffic. I was once again standing alone in the room in my nighttime t-shirt and shorts, looking around at the walls. Soon enough the blue, indigo orb zipped into the room and transported me back to the same point in the living room that I had been picked up from. As usual, only a few minutes had passed local time and I tried to go back to bed to sleep. I really had a lot racing through my head at that point, so I laid in bed staring at the ceiling and finally got up and did a small update on Facebook and gave David Wilcock a small update on Skype. I then began to type out the details of the conference so that I would have them outlined for this longer report. This ends the report of this particular conference. I'm now in Boulder, CEO at the GoodETxSG HQ, shooting 5 episodes of Disclosure with David Wilcock. So far, I have not been informed of any upcoming SSP, Sphere Alliance conferences, and hope to have some downtime to spend with my family and recover from the recent high-activity period of meetings. Thank you for all of the moral and other support that has been offered. It is much appreciated and is vital to assisting me continue this work. Gonzalez has a very nice support structure of both funds and technologies through the SSP Alliance. As I have been reminded several times by the SSP Alliance Council, I do not work for them. I work for the Sphere Alliance, who see things on a different level. They are great about working with people's hearts to make sure we have what we need and nothing more. They certainly want to keep me humble and dependent on maintaining a positive karma. I have chosen this path and will continue to travel it, as difficult as it is at times. Thank you for the love and positive energy.